Well, thanks everyone for joining our webinar today. We'll be focused on the topic of Microsoft Power Platform, providing you an introduction into the Dataverse, as well as the Power Apps. You're a part of that. My name is Rob Hirschman. I'm with a Microsoft Gold Partner. We're called PROJILITY. We specialize in implementing Microsoft-based project and portfolio management solutions for large enterprises. That's everything from engineering, construction, IT, and new product development. Organizations typically come to us when they can't easily explain what's going on across all their projects. They don't easily understand what's going on across all their resources, having a hard time getting management and reports out to make business decisions. We do offer services and solutions in several core areas. One of those is the deployment and consulting services of Microsoft solutions, from Microsoft PPM through strategic portfolio management, through systems integration, through the Power Platform, which is a lot of what we're focused on today. We do offer pre-built software solutions called Hammerhead that provide better access to your enterprise data in our data warehouse, provide acceleration through Power BI, synchronize Active Directory and your PPM system, as well as connect Microsoft Teams into your project management application. And finally, we provide support services, post-go-live support around your PPM and your Power Apps environments. We do have a series of upcoming webinars. The first is a Microsoft Project Virtual Conference that'll be hosted on May 11th. We will be hosting that, and that will be focusing on some latest tool updates from Microsoft Project and the Power Platform. You'll be able to ask questions of our Ask the Experts panel, made up of directors of PMOs and PPM experts across industry as well as government. We also have a final webinar in this series on reporting coming up on June 9th. All of our conferences and webinars start at 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Hopefully you can join us for one of those upcoming sessions. If you do miss any of these sessions, they are all available on our YouTube channel, which is listed here. Everything from playlists on best practices for deployment, including your resource management, Power Platform, integration with Teams. They're all available on our YouTube channel. So hopefully you can go out and find some great content there for you. But let's focus on our content today. Today, we're focused on an introduction to the overall Microsoft Power Platform, which is a new platform that Microsoft has released in Office 365 in the cloud. We'll provide you with an understanding of Power Apps and the Dataverse, how those components work, walk through different types of Power Apps that are available and the different services that are available through Microsoft. Finally, we'll walk you through an approach for deployment and supporting and governance of these applications and give you some questions to start getting started down this road and answer questions. If you do have questions as we go through the webinar, please log them in the Q&A manager or the IM window you'll see on the top right-hand corner of your Teams screen, and we'll take those towards the end. But let's jump right in. So the Microsoft Power Platform was introduced about 4 years ago as a way, completely in the Microsoft Office 365 cloud, you could do many different things. You could analyze your data with Power BI. You can build applications specifically in forms with Power Apps. You can start to automate manual business processes across the enterprise and connect data using Power Automate. And also Power Virtual Agent, which is a chatbot and artificial intelligence engine to connect this information to your end customer. So these are some of the core components. We'll be focusing just on the Power Apps and the Dataverse, which is behind that today in our session. Dataverse down being at the bottom, which Scott is going to get into in a bit. Data connectors, which are ways you can connect data in your Microsoft Office 365 environment into other applications you may have out there in other databases. And finally, there is something called the AI or Artificial Intelligence Builder, which is a way Microsoft provides a service running in the background to provide artificial intelligence services. While again, this is the entire Power Platform. Most of the requests we get from our clients are really around that Power Apps component. How do I plan to deploy applications, as well as the Dataverse behind that? So with that, I'm actually going to hand the presentation off to Scott Innes. Scott is our practice manager for our Power Platform practice, and is going to be walking you through a couple of different components as it relates to Power Apps. Scott?
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it. Good afternoon, everyone. So looking at Power Apps from just the perspective of starting of what is Power Apps in the most general sense, it's essentially a set of capabilities for implementing no-code or low-code applications. And why are organizations concerned with that, and why do they care? And it's typically with just the ability to provide value to the organization from a couple of perspectives, both from the business perspective and the IT perspective. And that value can be thought of in a couple of terms, really around flexibility, scalability, and security. And at the end of the day, leveraging all of those benefits and capabilities in a way that is going to allow the business to achieve its results faster, and IT potentially to be supporting that activity and overall saving time and money in the process. From an IT perspective, Power Apps allows for leveraging a whole set of security capabilities that are integrated with and are already available within the broader Microsoft platform. The flexibility of the platform allows for taking an incremental approach for moving functionality into the Power Apps platform. And really, there's some flexibility there as well with regards to enabling IT to put in essentially levels of rigor related to the different business cases that might be implemented in the Power Apps or in the pipeline for that, and put different levels of IT governance, operational control, et cetera, just kind of based on the different complexity and criticality of the use cases that the business is bringing to the table, that Power Apps is being considered for. And so that's an element, again, of being able to enable IT to provide responsiveness to the business. In many cases, as we'll see, empower business teams to be hands-on and do work themselves, but also have control over how that's implemented in the organization. So just compliance in general from data privacy, et cetera, is contained, and just general IT security in particular. From a business perspective, again, being able to streamline and automate existing activities that are either manual or paper-based today, right, is something that's typically the root of every use case that the business is coming to the table with. So as an example scenario, a type of initiative we often see Power Apps having a key role in is digital transformation. And so in that case, IT can be standardizing again across how the digital transformation is going to be manageable into the future. But Power Apps is then able to look at different types of legacy applications, move those into this new framework that IT is leveraging Power Platform for, and at the same time addressing currently manual and outdated processes. Now, Microsoft uses these terms, and it's an industry term as well, of no code and low code. And in theory, you don't need experience with software development to use Power Apps. But in practice, what we see is, depending upon some of the things we just mentioned, the complexity involved, the criticality of the systems, et cetera, there is a need to have a certain type of background or experience related to application development and IT in order to effectively implement. And again, it's not a one size fits all. There's a lot of flexibility there. And as we look at the different types, we'll dive into that, those differences and where those kind of lines lie. But Rob, if we can switch to the next slide, before we dive into the different types, we wanted to touch on Dataverse for a moment, because that can really serve as a foundation for these low code and no code capabilities. That opportunity to leverage Dataverse can kind of come in a couple different forms. One is the idea of having the opportunity to implement a shared data language for the business and analytical applications to leverage, which basically means using a set of standardized schemas across apps, data schemas, essentially having common tables and fields that again are standardized so that you can start to do the analytics across all of your different applications and users. Now, those data schemas can be built from scratch, specific to the business, or there is the ability to start with what Microsoft provides out of the box, which is called the Common Data Model, which then can be extensible into this to meet the specific business needs of the organization. And The overall goal there is the idea of what's termed enabling data interoperability, right? So different apps really in different parts of the business, all leveraging the same data, with the idea of leading to increased productivity and insights into the business. Now that tends to be somewhat of a bigger picture consideration and a value that's realized over time. But when we're looking at organizations from a multi-app, multi-use case perspective, it's certainly a relevant topic to be considered. The other element of Dataverse that's really applicable is the key role it can play in controlling access and authorization to different pieces of information. And so Microsoft 365 already has a lot of different capabilities around that. So that's more of an element that it can integrate into and again play a part in. It's not necessarily the full picture, but Dataverse can certainly provide value from that perspective. Another area that Dataverse can serve is really as a bridge to a whole set of capabilities in Azure related to integration and infrastructure. Typically where that comes into play is in scenarios where there's considerations around just a high volume of data. It can be a driver, the need for refresh frequency. So if we have a need to have data more in a real-time presentation as opposed to a nightly or weekly scheduled synchronization, those types of things, and things also like logging and being able to report from an audit perspective of who changed what when, right? And so Dataverse can provide a lot of value in enabling that. But again, that goes back to the idea of not every use case needs that. It's just something that can be, again, a consideration when we're evaluating how best to leverage Power Apps and the broader Power Platform to meet the business needs. And then the other thing we wanted to kind of highlight was there's really two flavors of Dataverse. So there's what we would call Dataverse just standard. And then also Dataverse for Teams. And there's really a trade-off there that we want to talk about just for a moment and kind of highlight that this is something that should be considered and looked into. But it's Dataverse for Teams does have a limited set of capabilities, but on the flip side, it is also included with several different layers of the Microsoft 365 license. So most folks coming in already have that in play. And so that can be a consideration as well during the whole process. And so, Rob, let's move to the next slide and we'll take a minute to talk just a little bit about the differences of those two flavors for Dataverse. So there's a couple different aspects that we're looking at on these slides. I will highlight that this is a subset of the differences. It can be a little more involved with this, and certainly something that IT, if we are implementing a broader play for Power Platform to be kind of a standard or one of the standards for enabling business applications that need to take into consideration. Looking at, for example, the different types of data features. So there are certainly things that Dataverse for Teams provides, right? This highlights a lot that it doesn't. Common data model was something we touched on just a moment ago. That's only available in the standard Dataverse. Advanced data types can be, as an example, enabling multiple currencies. So if you had a business that was in different countries or leveraging different currencies and needing to translate that, right? It's not natively available. And that's kind of what that means, right? It's not natively available. Certainly something that could be built custom, but is it really worth the effort? Non-relational storage is maybe one that jumps out as well. So that ties back into the logs, but also things like images and files. When we talk about the environment lifecycle aspect, really here, data volume is one of the key drivers. And so when we're looking at the best design and approach for implementing. Rob, did we lose the screen there?
Coming here. I don't
see in black. I'll bring up.
I'm going to reshare it. Hold on 1 second.
Okay.
Let's see what's going on.
But yeah, Matt, the size of the data that needs to be stored and supported by the application is certainly a critical consideration again, right, to look at. And then as I kind of touched on before, from an integration perspective, if you're doing something what I would call, we've labeled here, enterprise grade integration, Dataverse is going to have that capability to reach out into the broader Azure world. So for example, if there's a large volume of data that needs to be brought into the app, there's a tool called Azure Event Hub that can be leveraged. If there's integration with other enterprise systems, ERP, work management, etc., there's something called the Azure Service Bus. If you're really looking at continual movement of data and analytics and access, Azure Synapse can be involved. And so again, that is its own topic in and of itself, and tends to be just really relevant for those more complex and particular enterprise level applications. And then from a security perspective, when we talk about Dataverse, you do have the idea of by environment being able to secure and control access. You can do that by type of data. You can do that by rows within each type of data, and then also from a field level as well. When you really get down to about as granular as you can get, you start to see that there's differences there between the two versions here of Dataverse. And so hopefully that gives just a brief intro, right? That when we're looking at these two flavors, it does need to be taken into account. Dataverse for Teams can be a great option, especially out of the gate for initial, opportunities for Power Apps in the pipeline. But again, if we're going straight out of the gate into something very complex and high volume, then Dataverse probably is something that really needs to be given a good look as well. Next slide, please, Rob. So now we get to the different types of Power Apps that Microsoft provides. And most of the time, you're going to be using, folks are going to be using the model-driven and Canvas app types. Portals tend to mostly be focused on use cases that are public facing, at least to this point in time. One of the great things about Power Apps is Microsoft is continually releasing updates and enhancements and capabilities. So that's all, portals, I think, will more and more take on a bigger role moving forward. But, starting with model-driven apps, if you look at that, we look at that Microsoft Dataverse, and this is why we wanted to kind of touch on Microsoft Dataverse first and understand what, to at least to a degree, what Microsoft Dataverse consists of. Model-driven apps have to be run on Microsoft Dataverse, and not only that, it's the standard version of Microsoft Dataverse, so not Dataverse for Teams. Model-driven apps are going to really provide a predefined user experience. It's very particular and consistent, which in some cases is a great thing, and in other cases, right, is not so much, just depending on the audience typically, and we'll look at that a little deeper in a moment. Outside of that, you have the Canvas apps. Really the inverse of model-driven apps from a certain perspective. Model-driven apps tend to be very driven by, if this is true and this other thing is true, then we can use it. Else you can't use it, and so by default you kind of end up in Canvas apps, right? So a model-driven app, if those criteria aren't met, the Canvas app is really the way to go. And then portal, again, typically tied to more external public-facing scenarios. Also leverages the Dataverse, although you do have integration opportunities and extensibility opportunities as well. But we're going to focus mostly today on the model-driven apps and the Canvas apps. And I think one thing it's important to kind of understand here is that when we're delivering to the business a solution to meet a use case that they have, we're not necessarily constrained within that solution to picking only one of these apps. You can have one or more apps involved in a solution. So, just kind of maybe as an example, and the idea is that you're using potentially different apps of different types to really provide a particular audience the experience and capabilities that they need that's particular to them. And so, as an example, we've worked with a company that does residential doors and windows. And so they have an overarching solution, but really two different sides, types of audiences that are involved. And so they have in-house reps that are going and visiting homeowners and working with the homeowner to really drive them making the purchasing decision, right? So they want, they want in that kind of experience, a very tailored UI. It's a very visual UI, and they want to make that whole process of the homeowner making the decision very intuitive, right? So the in-house rep is using it, but they're sharing it with the homeowner, and in that perspective, the client, the owner is really the audience. Once that purchase is made, though, we've got a whole back-end set of folks, right, around contracting, invoicing, ordering materials, at some point scheduling the installation team. That the user experience for those folks is completely different than what's needed for Canvas apps. And we probably have a lot more flexibility there. So in that case, model-driven app fit. And so that's just an example, hopefully, for folks of, just to explain the idea that you can have multiple apps involved with a solution, and we're in no way limited to just having one app at a time available per use case. Okay, Rob, I think we can go to the next slide. Okay, so now diving into the model-driven app. Model-driven apps are really especially well suited to apps that are process-driven, back-end process-driven. Typically, they tend to be what we would call data dense. There's a lot of different types of entities that are represented as tables. There's relationships between these tables, and that structure of data is really the experience of of how the user interacts with the app. And so, again, that ties back to maybe what we talked about a moment ago, good examples, tracking the contracts, right? Having maybe multiple end users internally that need to work with the contract or an invoice or some kind of material order at different points in the process. Each of those things having its own life cycle, right? A contract life cycle spans maybe a longer period of time, and within that you have several invoicing life cycles, material orders life cycles, etc. That's just the type of scenario that model-driven apps are going to really fit well with. The design UI starts with and kind of ends with how that data is modeled within the underlying Dataverse. So that structure is really great, though. One of the benefits is as you implement model-driven apps, you will have a consistent user experience from app to app to app. So when you have your internal folks working with these different things, that consistency really can help drive user confidence and help with just easier adoption with the organization as we move forward. Okay, Rob, let's go to the next slide, please. So after kind of highlighting that design paradigm, we wanted to just kind of look at what a model-driven app consists of from a user interface perspective. Now, just in general, the UI is built to be what Microsoft calls responsive, quote unquote, across devices. Means so it will automatically adjust if you're on a tablet or a phone versus your desktop PC, and that's true for the views and the forms, etc. Whereas as a counterpoint in Canvas apps, that has to be built in specifically, and does take some effort to do where it's a native within the model-driven app. As you're working and building the model-driven app, you very much see what you get as you go. It's your changes to your apps you see occur directly in the design UI, so that really helps to facilitate rapid development. And truly, right, when we say Power Platform has this idea of no code and low code, no code is what applies to the model-driven app. Your model-driven app at a higher level, it's generally going to consist of these three areas we've got listed here on the slide. From a navigation perspective, there is the ability to organize and group different links, but for most cases, the links on the left in your navigation are going to be one-to-one with your tables. Now, you can include reports and things like that. There is flexibility. We don't mean to say that there's not, but it is very structured. For each of those links that we have on the side that's showing data and information from one of our Dataverse tables, you're going to have a view in section 2 there. Views are built using total drag and drop controls. There's a lot of native capabilities there, being able to work with a record, create a record, sort, filter, search. You can enable charts related to each record as well. And then once you've selected an individual record from a view, you're then into a form specific to that record. There's a lot of flexibility within the form, but again, constrained within the rules that Microsoft has put in place, which essentially also allows you to do drag and drop. So you can have multiple tabs, you can have multiple columns and sections within each of those tabs. You can show they have just a whole set of controls related to text fields, number fields, date selectors, drop downs, what's called a subgrid, which is basically a set of related records to the one you're on, can be displayed there. And so you really have some good controls there. Now, with all that rigidity said, the direction Microsoft has been moving is to actually allow the embedding of some customizations within a model-driven app. And so that's where we start to see some of the blending between the different app types. So you could, in theory, have a custom action or command bar that triggers an embedded Canvas app page. And so you can start to enhance model-driven apps, certainly outside of the kind of the core native initial experience. And that's something that Microsoft has really shown the ability to execute on and continuing to incrementally add value and flexibility there. Okay, Rob, next slide, please. And so when looking at a model-driven app, kind of to reiterate what we've said there, when are we going to use a model-driven app? Well, number one, Dataverse has to be the answer from a storage and a data tables perspective. Is it a process-driven use case that is really based upon a set of data structures and relationships? And then the other aspect thing really come into play here as well is if you're already invested in the Microsoft licensing, it is a no-code experience. You can really get value very quickly and continue to enhance the application, even with folks that don't have much of an IT background at all. Next slide, Rob. So now we're switching over to Canvas apps. And this really is where we're going to go if we want to build highly tailored application, as opposed to starting with the data structure of the underlying use case. We're really typically starting with the user experience. And so you can support multiple audiences for sure, certainly, but that is where we're going to start from a design perspective, and that this allows us to craft a highly tailored interface and essentially have full control over the app design. When you're building a Canvas app, there is no drag and drop per se. There's an element of it, but you start with a blank canvas, blank page, which is where the title comes from. Now those Canvas apps as well can you work across devices. They can also natively start to access different features on a device that's a mobile or tablet. So for things like location and cameras, etc. But again, the responsiveness is not going to be there natively. That's something that has to be accounted for during the design and build process. And so Canvas apps can take on a number of different implementation patterns. Certainly a standalone mobile app is one of those, is a common one that's a good fit. We also see Canvas apps, again, not being constrained to Dataverse, used as to customize essentially the forms for a SharePoint list, as an example, to kind of enhance and supercharge some of that information and get away from the default SharePoint forms. Canvas apps are also, we see many times, embedded within Microsoft Teams, and so trying to leverage that hub that we have from a user interaction and collaboration to have the app directly available there. And then kind of circling back to what I mentioned a moment ago, it can also then be part of a broader overarching business case, providing key functionality on top of and in addition to what was provided by a model-driven app. So we talked about model-driven apps being no code, but now the low code term comes into play here. And so we still are not in a place where we don't need traditional programming languages, right? So there's no C#, there's no object-oriented programming or skills needed. But there are some aspects here where, whoever's got that responsibility for being the builder, the maker, as Microsoft would term it, does have to have a really strong grasp of the logical relationships between the elements of the form and the data. And so there's certainly a certain type of user and background that's needed when you get to Canvas apps. Model-driven apps tend to be really broad-based as far as who can build them. We start to narrow that down when we get into Canvas apps, especially as the complexity increases. And so we've got a couple things listed here. Power Automate can be fairly straightforward, but again, that's an example. If it gets complex, it can be pretty involved. And some folks are going to be more comfortable and capable around that. And then Power FX, which is the expression-based language that Microsoft has within the Canvas apps. And so think of a blank canvas, think of adding different components to the UI, pages and forms and buttons, etc., that you're going to use expressions, which are essentially formulas, to drive those pages and forms and buttons. Things like visibility, whether they're enabled or not, how they integrate or interact with backend data sources for pulling data and presenting it, or deleting records, adding records, editing records, and then also the navigation between pages and forms within the apps, right? So certainly more involved than a model-driven app, but not nearly as complicated or a learning curve as something like a traditional programming language. Next slide, please, Rob. And so hitting on the back end data side of things, and just to provide a sampling here, again, in comparison with model driven, which was Dataverse only, there are literally hundreds of connectors that Microsoft has made available that can be really just plugged into the Canvas app and leveraged across all those UI components we talked about that make up the app. Just thinking from a Microsoft perspective, Microsoft 365 users, Exchange, Power BI, really any service that you can think of that Microsoft has, SharePoint, it can integrate with natively. Looking at external systems, most of the major ERP systems, for example, most of the major work management systems, Jira, things of that nature, can all have connectors, and really that number 250 might be low at this point. Actually, it's because it's really growing all the time. And in addition to that, there is the possibility to create custom connectors. So if Microsoft hasn't covered maybe something that's needed, there is the ability to create those. Now, when we talk about enabling custom connectors, you certainly are outside of no code and low code at that point, right? That is, you're getting more into the traditional programming language, and you're going to need folks with the appropriate experience for that. The next slide, please, Rob. And so, again, taking a step back and looking when to use a Canvas app. I mean, we've got a lot of detail here that we've talked about, kind of summarized and called out. The full control of app design, what kind of data sources we need, if there's integration needed with other elements of the Microsoft platform, etc. But really, there's a lot of considerations. All these had to be evaluated, to a degree on a per use case perspective when determining which type is the best fit, or which set of types is the best fit. But really, Canvas apps comes into play is if it doesn't meet the set criteria that is a data model, then by default you're kind of working towards a Canvas app. And so certainly Canvas apps are the most flexible, but also have that trade-off of being needing that low code experience. So you do need a set of capabilities, either access to it in-house or out of house, that can bring those capabilities and experience to the table. Okay, Rob, that's the end of that slide.
Right. Scott, thanks for the great overview. Yeah, of Power Apps and Dataverse. We do have a Q&A manager because we just went through a bunch of technical and process related content. If anybody has any questions, if you just want to click on that and put your questions in that Q&A manager, we'll start to take those. As you start to put those in, we did want to give you a little bit of background on the typical process for actually planning and deploying Power Apps and on the Power Platform. It all begins with good analysis of the business needs and coming up with a solid deployment approach. You can see here there are really 4 phases of that. The planning phase on the left, which is you're really establishing the business reason. Why are we building an application? Why are we automating a business process? Determine who's involved and who the stakeholders are going to be on the business, IT, and support side. How is it going to be deployed? When does it need to be deployed? Do we have any deadlines? And are you organizationally ready from a platform perspective to support Power Apps and Power Platform? That's all the governance and IT related support that needs to be there. As Scott mentioned, just because it's low code or no code doesn't mean it means no support. So you definitely need to think through what resources you're going to need to have to support one and multiple applications as you roll this out. Once we're done with our planning, we then move into the implementation phase. We're doing the actual analysis and design of the very specific application or applications we're trying to build out. We go through a build and validate phase, and then we go through a deployment phase. So that's the implementation of the technology. But then really is important is really transition and adoption and having good steps in place to train users based off their role, what they need to do every day. So you embed the application in their jobs to do any kind of data migration, moving data from an existing application into the current one. So users don't lose where they were in the old system, so they can pick up right where they left off. And then providing end user hands-on support. That's really, really critical to driving good use and adoption of the application. And finally, having an ongoing cycle of operations and operations management, having that governance level and control level. So you're managing changes and requests and governance around the entire platform of what people should and shouldn't do and can and can't do. And then also bringing on new users. What is the approach to that? Who is going to be responsible for that? Is it the business? Is it IT? Is it someone from one of the business units? And how do you train users on an ongoing basis? So as you think about that, think about those 4 phases. We'll really stress that planning phase is probably the most important one. You want to think about the why and the what. Why are we doing this? What is the business rationale for it? And that's where your business case really comes into play. Identifying some kind of meaningful business objective, some kind of business value of reducing expenses, increasing throughput, increasing sales, increasing efficiency and effectiveness, and really defining success up front. It's not all about the application, it's about what the application can do from a business perspective. You're going to be establishing who the key stakeholders are in the core team. We're going to be part of the initial deployment and the ongoing administration and maintenance, and make sure they're a core part of it. And then the how and the when. What is the implementation approach? Are we going to be iterative or waterfall? Are we going to roll this out in a big bang where it goes out to everybody? Is it pilot and stage for different subgroups as we roll it out more broadly if it's an enterprise application? So really think through these things and start planning for those. As you get into the build and validate, this is actually where kind of the sausage making happens. You've got your iterative or your more agile or Scrum approach where you're building and validating. And, these applications are really nicely tailored to that kind of a life cycle. If you're more of a traditional waterfall house, that can be supported as well. You go through an initial development and deployment, you go through formal validation and testing, then you get updates from testing and you update that, and you go through that continuous improvement cycle. So, whether you're iterative, waterfall, some kind of blend, again, we're kind of building something based on an existing business process or a new process on this platform. So you want to think about what that methodology is. But as you get into that deployment phase, we'll really stress that ownership is probably one of the most important things you'll start to establish. And we look at the chart on the right, we start looking at, who's going to be the administrative owner or responsibility stakeholders for the application, who determines when changes come in, what they're going to be made, what's the impact of the business, how do I need to train users, existing and new ones, on that? Is that the business? Is it the business in combination with IT? Do we have another group that also supports reporting, because that's going to impact what I do with the application? We also want to think about the licensing aspect. Scott went through in the beginning the difference between Dataverse and Dataverse for Teams. There are some licensing and cost implications to going one direction for another or another, and you really want to think about that up front so you don't end up in a situation where you plan for no licensing and suddenly you've got 3,000 users you need to buy licenses for. The data is a really important part of this, that middle layer, and that talks about what data are you going to be capturing in your system and your data model. You want to start identifying that data that's existing today that may need to be migrated or uploaded into that environment. Once you have the application in a testing mode, or when you're about to go live and you want to onboard users, it's also a good time to onboard their data, maybe get them trained as well as assisting with that data migration so they really take ownership of the new system. Finally, the people side. This is, again, probably the most important part of any of these projects. Identify who needs to be trained, what classes you're going to be providing, what's the frequency for updates to that training, who has the roles and responsibility for supporting and delivering all of that. So really getting to that deployment phase and thinking about the people, the data, and the ownership is important. Finally, ongoing operations. There's really 4 components to ongoing operations as it relates to Power Platform and really any application. At first, at the top, you have that governance. Who is going to make decisions? Who is going to be overseeing the changes, the processes, the procedures in place around the application and the process in general? You've got change management, and there's always going to be requests for changes to the application, to reports, to interactions with the tool, to maybe integrating it with other data you may have. Having a formal change management process around the application is pretty important. User training, and this is really who is responsible and the what are you going to be training people to do, and what kind of data do you want to get? It's really driven by the quality of the training. And finally, having some kind of a cycle of user feedback. How are you going to be capturing and processing different requests from users so you can make adjustments to the system? You want to listen to your users. You want to really give them an application that's responsive to their needs, but also give your organization, your business, or your agency the data they need to make business decisions and really make that data institutional. Finally, we look at onboarding, who has the responsibility for bringing new users on, and then once users are in the tool, who has responsibility for keeping them up to speed. So, how do you get started? We just educated you on a lot of the different possibilities with the Power Platform and Dataverse. What do you need to do in your organization to get something started? Well, the first thing is always, look for something that's low hanging. Look for any existing applications you have today that may be really good candidates for the Power Platform. Maybe it's a set of SharePoint legacy applications that are out there that nobody really loved the user interface, and you really want to expand that out, and you're starting to run into some data challenges with the lists within SharePoint. This may be a good application for that. InfoPath, which is being sunset by Microsoft and being replaced by Microsoft Forms, this may be a more enterprise class way to address your InfoPath solutions that are out there and move them over into a more modern Office 365 platform that's scalable with a real database behind it. Finally, a lot of organizations still have Lotus Notes out there, believe it or not. Maybe you've got some Lotus Notes applications with some process and workflow in there. Might be a good opportunity to bring it into Office 365. So think about existing applications you have, but also start thinking about, are there some things today we do really manually that we could really streamline and automate? And it may be something like expense approvals. It may be something like cost management. It may be something around capturing changes on different efforts you have going on. Can we automate processes we have? And this is a great platform and a great opportunity to do it. Do you have, and this is a question, before you start rolling out the application, do you have the standards, the governance, and the resources needed to support these applications at all? A lot of folks are already trained on, SharePoint governance, trained on Office governance, but this is a new platform. So putting in a kind of a COE or a center of excellence approach to this, a good methodology and some standards so you can easily start to roll applications out and support them is really, really important. And another important part of it is maybe you own a lot of the licenses for this. You've made the organizational investment in Office 365, and a lot of 365, the E3 and E5 plans come with Power Platform licenses as a part of them embedded. You need to take a look at that and say, well, maybe I've got entitlements to these licenses that I can leverage to reduce my cost of operations. Maybe I can get rid of those Lotus Notes applications, or maybe I've got some other, point applications that just capture specific information. Maybe I can bring that into Office 365, have a centralized data model, have it part of my Office platform and my support mechanism going forward, and reduce my overall cost by going to a platform I already invest in. And finally, if you're thinking about, I'm really trying to centralize my data, have a common data model, have that part of Azure and Office 365, so I can do true enterprise, not only workflows and process and applications, but enterprise reporting. A lot of organizations we find, they build a lot of Power BI reports. They have a lot of Power BI workspaces. It's almost like they've taken Excel and they've just moved it to a server. Why not centralize all that through an enterprise reporting data model and maybe Azure Data Lake, and use Power Apps and Office 365 to glue all this together in one place? So these are some questions you can start asking about how you get started. If you are looking for help, what we can do at PROJILITY is, as we are experts in this technology and the process around it, we can bring you a lot of good ideas. So what you can do is maybe, work with your team and pick an application or some kind of a use case, and we'll support that first phase, that envisioning. We'll come in, we'll spend an hour or two with you to ask lots of questions and come back to you with some options and recommendations on how you can leverage Power Platform to get to your end state. Microsoft has some great programs around proof of concept funding for this. You may own a lot of these licenses already. There's Dataverse for Teams that's already out there. There's a lot of great investments and entitlements you already have you can leverage that we can team with you on. So if you are interested in having these discussions, reach out. You can send an email to info@PROJILITY.com, attention Power Platform. Share with us what your requirements or needs are. We'll work with you and come up with some really good ideas as ways you can leverage this platform. So really our goal today was to give you an overview and an education of some of the components in the Power Platform that could be of value to you. At this point, we are going to open the floor to any questions anyone might have. I'm looking in the Q&A manager. You can just log into the Q&A manager at the top of your screen. Take those questions. Okay. We don't see any questions. If you would want to follow up, you can send an email to info@PROJILITY.com. I'm Ram Hirschman, partner at PROJILITY. We were joined by Scott Innes today. We appreciate everybody's time, and we look forward to seeing you on our upcoming project virtual conference, which is in May. Have a great afternoon, and thanks for joining today. Bye-bye.